This is Terrence Andre Banks with Information Age Financial Solutions coming to you with an article I read from Sovereign Man. Who knew 2 cents could go so far? As always, with titles is always what brings me to finding out about the article. Fantastic one, especially we're dealing with after the presidential debates that went on. A little political, but it's definitely worth your time. It's something to pay attention to, especially in the economic climate that we're living in. Dive right in. As always, I'm going to put a link inside the description. About a week and a half ago, I had terrible sinus infection. I'm talking really bad. My sneezes were so ferocious that I half expected the U.S. Geological Survey to register them on the Richter scale. In the midst of all this misery, I became acutely interested in the healthcare plans of leading U.S. presidential contenders, and stayed up late at night when I couldn't sleep. Combining through their solutions. Most of all, I was curious how they intended to pay for everything. Now, because I graduated from the third grade, I apparently have an unfair advantage when looking at the numbers. 2 plus 2 equals 4 in my world, but with this BS monkey math that passes legitimate public policy, they make the numbers whatever they want them to be. And their fantasy arithmetic was on full display in last night's presidential debate. Elizabeth Warren claimed that her 2 cents wealth tax would pay for universal health care, universal preschool, funding for historically black colleges and universities, funding for public schools, free university education, the cancellation of student debt, and of course, Medicare for all. Wow! Who knew that 2 cents could go so far? Now here's the cost of these programs over 10 years according to her own website. Child care and preschool was $700 billion, historically black colleges and universities are $50 billion, public school funding and wage increases $800 billion, cancellation of student debt north of $1.5 trillion to continue to rise. Free tuition at public universities, $700 billion. So before we even get to Medicare for all, the total bill is already more than $3.75 trillion over the next decade. But Warren herself claims that her ultra-millionaire 2 cents wealth tax will raise only $2.75 trillion over the next decade. That's $1 trillion less than what she needs to pay for just a handful of proposals. Then there's the Medicare for All proposal, which she also acknowledges will cost $50 trillion over 10 years. It dwarfs the cost of all of her other plans combined. Clearly, the $50 trillion program cost vastly exceeds the projected $2.75 trillion wealth tax revenue. But not to worry, in addition to the 10-cent ultra-millionaire tax, she also claims that she would pay for Medicare for all by increasing the corporate tax. This is probably the biggest logical fallacy of all. Back in 2017, when the government slashed the corporate tax from 35% to 20%, the stock market soared in response. So guess what's going to happen if they raise the corporate tax back up to 35% or more? The stock market is going to do it. Drop. Duh. If the stock market drops, the amount of wealth held by ultramillionaires will drop too. This is pretty easy to understand. If Amazon's stock price falls, the wealth of Jeff Bezos falls with it. So sure, they'll collect more corporate tax, but they end up collecting less wealth tax. The wealth tax and corporate tax are like a seesaw. As one goes up, the amount of money you collect from the other goes down. You can't have it both ways. But of course, these Bolsheviks fail to understand this concept. So they keep chanting their 2 cent mantra like a cheesy marketing slogan and delude voters into believing that a small percentage of taxpayers can foot the bill for everything. There's another problem with this proposal. Warren wants to provide Medicare for all, but she apparently doesn't realize that the current Medicare program is nearly bankrupt. It's really need to pay attention to. Page 6 of the most recent report from the Medicare Board of Trustees states that very clearly the program's largest trust fund, known as the Hospital Insurance Fund, will run out of money in 2026. That's just 7 years from now. So even though the current program is almost broke, and the amount of money needed to provide Medicare for all is nearly 20 times greater than the projected revenue from her wealth tax, she still pretends that this is a viable option. Now, I remember a few years ago when Nigel Farage told me other drinks that communism was a nice idea. He repeated again on stage at my conference the next day. Nigel obviously didn't mean that communism was a good thing. He meant that the idea of eradicating poverty, the idea of eliminating hunger, those were nice ideas. And sure, free university, no more debt, free childcare, etc. all sound like nice ideas. Becoming the starting quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys also sounds like a nice idea. Sending Justin Bieber on a one-way trip to Mars sounds like a nice idea. And hey, as long as we're promising the world, let's give everyone a free mansion on the beach. That also sounds like a nice idea too. But the reality is that someone has to pay for this stuff. So finally, that's why I really want to read it. The reality is someone has to pay for it. It's worth repeating that statement. And when you intend to stick a few wealthy people with the bill for everything, the math just doesn't add up. Free healthcare, free university tuition, free childcare, universal basic income, etc. The slogan might as well be Make America Sweden. But you can't have Swedish socialism without Swedish taxes, up to roughly 60% of individual income tax, 25% VAT, 32% Social Security tax, 30% capital gains tax, etc. Everyone pays out the nose, not just the wealthy. And even those people who had sense to abandon their wealth, even those people had the sense to abandon their wealth tax. And to continue learning how to strive no matter what happens next in the world, I encourage you to download our free report, Plan B. Okay, because he goes into this his spiel about the Plan B, which is something to take a look at. Kind of jumbled up this article at the end, especially, but it's definitely worth paying attention to because no one really focuses enough on how to pay this. Even when they tell you that these different things are going to be the case, and we're going to tax these other individuals, the people just don't, rich or anybody else, just sit back and just take it. They find other ways to get out of it or just move and stop the business as well. So just take this consideration because we're living in different times and we really need to be much more educated and think critically, especially as the times go forward. If this video has been any value to you, please subscribe, leave some comments. And then to my next video, I'm out.